I remember having conversation on more than one occasion with my mom where she had a hard time understanding this idea that we felt like we didn't fit. And her asking, well, why can't you just be normal? Was essentially the message. She said it in a loving way that only a mother can, but
right.
She was genuinely asking, why can't you just be normal?
When you're driven, the need to accomplish a goal is relentless. Hard work and ambition compel you to do whatever's necessary. In my work as a personal injury trial lawyer for 18 years, it's common to meet driven people. Those with drive can have different personalities, careers, or backgrounds, but they possess one common factor. Despite their passions, driven people want to surround and motivate themselves with other driven people. If you want to learn how to overcome obstacles by learning from others, then tune in here. This is the Driven Crowd Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into episode 39 of the Driven Crowd Podcast, fueled by Snellings Law. I'm your host, Scott Snellings. Today, our guest is a former attorney and current serial entrepreneur, Tony Albrecht. In October of 21, Tony stopped practicing law, and 53 weeks later, he went all in building Contender, a marketing agency that serves law firms. Contender offers ghostwriting services and traction sessions to help law firm owners and other professionals utilize LinkedIn to grow their businesses and build their brand. Tony is also a co-founder of Unrationed, which blends mastermind groups with formidable physical challenges, which we'll get into, to create an environment that fosters personal and professional growth among members. Tony, welcome to the Driven Crowd Podcast, my friend.
Thrilled to be here, Scott. Thank you for the intro.
You bet. All right. So in your intro, it is very different, right? We've never had anyone on who focuses on branding through LinkedIn, / marketing through LinkedIn. And then we'll get into Unrationed as well. But let's start off with Contender. Tell me what Contender is and what it's all about.
Sure. So Contender is, as you said in the intro, we're a branding and content agency focused on helping mission-driven lawyers and leaders share their messages online. The way I think about it is, coming from the legal profession, where, as we've talked about, I practiced in St. Louis for more than a decade before leaving the practice and sort of falling into marketing. The world has changed very quickly, right? And we're going to unpack that more. Something that has become increasingly clear to me is just how much we need to be developing presences for the 21st century, where so much of our lives happen online. And this is all stuff they didn't teach us in school, right? Like none of us, at least those of us of a certain age, we're roughly the same generation, right, Scott? So
I'm a Gen Xer. I don't know about you, Tony.
I think I count as an elder millennial.
Okay, all right.
I think the
term is geriatric. We were just talking about this in the office over our Thanksgiving Friendsgiving celebration. I think it is a geriatric millennial.
That's fine. That's fine. I'm feeling more geriatric every day.
Right.
But what we've been building for the last year at Contender, is help a business helping leaders to get clear on what a personal brand can look like, and how they can share their message through content creation. And as you mentioned, we specialized in LinkedIn through this first year, which I'm sure we'll unpack more. How do you share your message and show up online in a way that can resonate with the people you're hoping to serve and have an impact on?
Well, and you start off by saying that your company focuses on mission-driven leaders, I think is what you said. And obviously, that's not the only people who need branding, right? I know when I was in law school, we talked absolutely zero about any kind of marketing whatsoever. And so what would you tell someone who's just coming out of law school, who's earlier in their career? What would you tell them about the need for a personal, quote unquote, brand?
It's a question I find myself answering on a daily basis these days, which is good. I think there's more and more interest in that question. And the bottom line is the world has changed dramatically, very quickly, right? And we all have come up in an education system where we do see things top down, hierarchical, centralized. And so the way if you're a law student about to enter the profession or just starting your career, we do tend to think about it in terms of, well, I'm not an expert yet. I'm just getting started. I've got to put in my time to move up that ladder before I'm really in a position that anybody would listen to me. And I think in the industrial era, that was largely true, because how else were you even going to get people to pay attention to you if you wanted to? In the internet age, in the connection economy, as marketer author Seth Godin has put it, that dynamic has flipped, where the way we think of LinkedIn is a great example, where I think everybody, just about everybody, learns that the way you use LinkedIn is to say when you get a new job, or say when you need a new job, or to share press releases or company announcements from your law firm or your company. And the thing that I discovered 2 years ago, almost by accident, if I'm being honest, was that because we all learned LinkedIn the same way, in this sort of industrial era, top-down mindset, everybody's feed was boring, right? It was press releases and job announcements just aren't all that interesting.
Right.
And that created this opportunity that more and more lawyers, yourself included, you're doing a great job with it, Scott, this year.
Thank you.
Lawyers are taking advantage of this dynamic where if you're willing to stand up and say something that matters to you as an individual, then that message is going to get disproportionately pushed by the LinkedIn algorithm, which is not necessarily top down, right? That algorithm is optimizing for something else. It's optimizing for what's interesting, for what's engaging, for what's quote unquote valuable. And that's the fundamental shift that I think we've seen across our society, really, without being overly hyperbolic about it, but where there are some new lawyers out there, relatively young. I think of somebody like Sharif Gray, who he's not that young. I think he's 34.
Yeah.
He's been practicing for maybe 7 years. Alex Ledbetter's a guy from my hometown, St. Louis, who's been out for 6 years and is doing some interesting stuff. I want to say Kimber Marie Faircloth, I think is her name. She's out of North Carolina. She's actually still in law school and doing some fantastic stuff with posting consistently and sharing her message. And these people are getting traction. When it comes to the number of lawyers on the platform, I think those three people I just named are in the top 1% of lawyers or legal professionals in terms of their reach and the people paying attention to them, simply by virtue of their being willing to stand up and share the message they have. I feel like I took a pretty simple question and gave you a very long answer.
No, I think that's fantastic. And I think one of the struggles is, right, especially if you're not at the top of that hierarchy, you're not a law firm owner, you're not a partner, you're not somebody of influence, if you will, is I don't have anything to say. I don't have anything important to say. And I'm going to echo you there of I have multiple law students from the UK, from the US, all over my feed talking about interesting things, right? It could be how they had a disagreement with one of their professors on a point of law, or what is law school like, or geez, is this what I really want to do? Right? It's almost the self-exploration of, oh my gosh, this is terrible. I don't know if this is what I want to do. And so, I think anybody can have a voice that really wants to put themselves out there with authenticity, and you can create something that's interesting that people would want to read.
And I'm not going to go on another 3-minute diatribe, but when you bring up authenticity, that is so key. And the simplest way to think about authenticity, it's a word that there are as many definitions as there are people who can say the word. I think of it as showing your point of view. It's showing things that are true to your experience. And those newer professionals or younger professionals, the ability and opportunity they have is that when you're willing to show up and I say something that matters to you, but even just show what you're wrestling with, what you're learning, what you're working on, what you're excited about from where you are. Even if you're a first year associate, you can share genuinely about the experience of being a first year associate in a way that other people can find interesting. And I can tell you for a fact will be more interesting than most of the stuff on LinkedIn. And there's the opportunity that when you start doing that, and if you can show up consistently, and I would say consistent, it could be once a week, doesn't need to be a major thing, that you're able to start to collect attention in a way that when your name pops up, people are interested in hearing what else you have to say. And it just builds a level of affinity and a level of trust in addition to name awareness that, say, for networking in the 21st century and in the connection economy, I'm biased at this point, given that I feed my family through personal branding and content, but I'm doing this because I'm on a mission, which is, I think we need to be figuring out how to do this at scale. We need as many people as possible figuring out how to show up online in genuine, authentic ways.
And I'm probably going to invite another diatribe here with this question, but so many lawyers, especially the business owners, right? They look at this and they say, okay, I can absolutely make that commitment. What's my ROI? And, I need, if I'm going to put this amount of time, effort, and energy into it, or if I'm going to hire someone, like a Tony, then I need to see, my return on investment being at least, 5 cases a month or something else, speaking gigs that I'm able to get or whatever. So what would you say in response to what's the ROI of actually digging in and developing a brand on LinkedIn?
The line that comes to mind is one that I heard Ed Herman, who was one of the managing partners of Brown and Crouppen, big plaintiffs personal injury firm in my hometown of St. Louis. I heard him say that if you're asking what the ROI of a billboard is, then you don't know what a billboard's for. And
love it.
I think that might be, I fear it's a cop out for me, but with what I've found with the work I'm doing with Contender and helping people develop personal brands and then create content that reflects and carries the message inherent in that brand. I came to this, I said on accident, but 3 years ago, I had no idea what a personal brand would have meant. And I would say even 18 months ago, I was allergic to the term, definitely resistant to it.
It sounds so arrogant, doesn't it?
It does. Well, yeah, it sounds so self-centered. To me, it sounds synthetic and manufactured in a way that's almost sleazy.
Right.
So I'm putting cycles to thinking about a better term to describe the power and the potential of what we're talking about, because ultimately what I discovered for myself, where once I started showing up on LinkedIn, I was writing about creativity, and I had just left the practice of law. I was in a business development role working with a friend's consulting company. And I was basically looking to just get in front of leaders in a certain industry, So then when I messaged them asking if they might be interested in talking or if they had any need for what this consulting company did, they'd be more inclined to at least respond to my message. And what I quickly found was I was able to, by sharing, talking about what I cared about, which was entrepreneurship, it was creativity, it was some lifestyle design. People did start paying attention, and people who were interested in the things I'm interested in started connecting with me and started following me. And I built this very robust, dynamic network over the course of 2022, where what I found was that when you get the attention, when you can collect attention, you're able to direct that attention in different ways. And I say that it's not linear, that this thing is not predictable. There's no way I could have predicted 2 years ago that you and I would be having this conversation, right. Scott, where I'm a personal branding, I was going to say expert. I don't even think of myself as an expert. I still think of myself as an experimenting enthusiast. But but what we've found is that when people show up in a genuine way, share their experiences, their insights, their understandings, their learnings, their stories, opportunities do follow. And so circling all the way back to the ROI question, if you're looking for straight lead gen in the way that you would expect from your SEO or your pay-per-click, you're not going to get it. And it's so wild for me to say this, but I've turned down contracts from people I'd really like to work with because of that reason, that they were focused on, I want to see this in this amount of time. And frankly, I can't make that happen. I don't know what's going to happen. But what I'm 100% confident on in my life today is, I think, a testament to the truth of this, is that good things can happen. And you mentioned Unrationed at the outset, our group for men pursuing extraordinary. We've grown that almost entirely through LinkedIn. Contender has grown both on the client side and on the team side. The folks I have building that business with me, I've grown that team almost entirely through LinkedIn as well. It's tremendously powerful.
All right, so you alluded to a nonlinear path, and I would say that exemplifies you to a T, taking the nonlinear path. So walk us through real quick your career trajectory, right? So you graduate, you go straight to law school, right?
I took a year.
You took a year, okay.
So I took 1 year after graduating from undergrad at Truman State University in Kirksville, Missouri. Ended up going to St. Louis University Law School, started in 2006. I finished in 2009 at the height of the recession. Best job offer I got, really the only job offer I had coming out of school, was to join a solo practitioner on the island of Guam, who, Anthony Camacho had gone to law school at SLU, had gone back to the island, and posted this job. I needed a change, so I accepted it and spent 1 year on the island of Guam. We'll linger there since it's pivotal to my story, where I share on LinkedIn about my rock bottom moment as an alcoholic and as a man, where Thanksgiving night of 2009, I regained consciousness in a jail cell on the island of Guam. And a line that I learned in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous that really resonates is you hit rock bottom when you stop digging. And that was the night I stopped digging. My last drink was about 6 months later, May 29th, 2010. And I ended up going back to St. Louis, my hometown, in September. getting a job on the defense side with an insurance litigation firm, handling primarily asbestos lawsuits in Madison County, Illinois, the world's largest asbestos docket. So I sort of fell into that through a friend, and ended up, well, I spent about 3 years doing that before torching my legal career for the first time, where I sold all my stuff, took a backpack and a one-way ticket to Bangkok, intending to spend a year traveling. Through some unforeseen circumstances, that 1 year turned into 4 years, but between full-time roles. I was doing contract work, actually in asbestos litigation throughout that time. I also had a stint working with a phenomenal civil rights firm in St. Louis called Arch City Defenders. I met the woman who would become my wife while at a meditation retreat in the Indian Himalaya in 2015. 2017, she had agreed to move to St. Louis after we got married. She told me I had 5 years before I'd be going to Canada, and she meant it. So yeah, I went back to litigating full time in 2017, spent another 4 years doing that, in the asbestos circuit there, and was on track to make partner in 2021. But 2020 was when we made the decision to move up to Canada to be closer to my wife's family. So my wife, myself, our two little ones, we came up almost 2.5 years ago now. At that point, partnered was taken off the table. And then it was kind of a question of, okay, what do we do now? As if I'm on sort of a dead end track. We made the decision in part because I knew I didn't want to do what I was doing for the next 15 years. So it was a decision in part of avoiding the golden handcuffs that would have made it very difficult to walk away. And that's when, like I had said before, I hatched a plan with a very good friend of mine to join his consulting company. And here we are. How was that, Scott? Did I cover most of the beats?
Yeah, I think most people's jaws are on the table right now, hearing that career trajectory and where you are now. So going back to the Guamanian jail cell, when you finally awoke from your stupor, I assume you kind of sat there on the floor. What was going through your head? Like, did you realize that should have been rock bottom, or were you still defiant?
That's an excellent question. And well, to be honest, at that point, I'm still drunk, right? I'm still rather drunk at that point. So I'm not sure there was much going through my head, but it wasn't the first serious consequence I'd had. It was not my first unpleasant run-in with law enforcement. I had ended up in emergency rooms on 2 different occasions in 2005 and 2008. There was a problem. And I remember my mom sitting me down for the first time in July of 2005, which was after I had a burn accident where I was so drunk at this camping bachelor party that while walking through the dark to go pee in the woods, I tripped and caught myself on the grill we had been using. For like earlier in the night. And serious burns on my hands, on my legs. Yeah, it was a bad scene. But that was the first time my mom, who she just passed away a couple months ago. This is a memory that was really unpleasant at the time, and I now remember very fondly. But she sat me down and said, "I think you've got a problem." And at that time, I was 22 years old, and I knew everything, right? So I most definitely was not open to that message. But by the time in Thanksgiving night 2009, that message had started to sink in. Where I remember a couple nights later sending an email to my family, basically just apologizing for a lot. And And I think at that point, to answer your question directly, what was going through my head was the sense that I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that I couldn't do what I've been doing, right? That things had to change, or things were going to get worse from where they were, which was, now I've got a court case. My career's already in jeopardy.
Right.
I'm 3 months into my first job as an attorney, and what's that going to do to that? Yeah.
So you walked away from practicing law on 2 different occasions, burned your career. I think those were your words. Did you ever really want to be a lawyer?
So I was DMing with somebody, a journalist who's about to go to law school. He's waiting on his acceptance letters. And he asked me what I thought about law school and my career. I watch out, guy. I'm the one you ask when you want to get talked out of going to law school. And the way I think about it is, ultimately I went to law school because I was hiding. I was afraid of failure. By the time I'd finished undergrad, I wanted a predictable, clear path to success and wealth and happiness. And I grew up in a household that very much emphasized education. And so for myself and my 2 sisters, there was a mentality of it's not so much if you'll go to college, it's a question of which professional degree do you think you'll get. And I have a sister who's an MBA, I have a sister who's a CPA, and then I went for law school. And ultimately, I think I made the decision for the wrong reasons. And I think a lot of people make that mistake, right? I think we think of doctors and lawyers as these 2 hallowed professions, and they can be. And to be honest with you, with what I'm doing with Contender and the conversations that I get to have with, again, mission-driven attorneys, I'm having a blast getting to know these people and hearing their stories. And there are times now we're talking to them, and I work almost entirely with people who are in your position, Scott, being trial attorneys on the plaintiff side. And I now realize that that's probably where I belong, is doing that work and telling those stories to juries on behalf of people who've been hurt. And had I fallen into that, maybe I'm still doing that, and I'm happy doing that. But as it was, and it's also hard for me to regret going, given how everything's unfolded. I've been very fortunate to find myself in this position where, because of my background and my career as an attorney, when I did accidentally get good at LinkedIn, I saw just this huge untapped potential on the platform for lawyers who were willing to say things that were more interesting than what most people were saying. And I would not have been able to capitalize on that opportunity were it not for my background. So is that a properly complicated response?
as all of yours are, Tony.
Yeah.
So it was funny because I was getting ready for the show, and I had kind of lists of questions. And I was sitting there this morning, having a cup of coffee and scrolling through LinkedIn, and I saw your post and said, you know what, I want to ask Tony and dig in a little bit to this. So if you're listening to this, it's Tuesday, November 28th, and you can go back to Tony's post from this morning. And I'll read the first part of it here. He creates a list, which he's very good at doing. I graduated from law school in 2009 as a deeply insecure, deeply indebted alcoholic. Here are 13 pieces of advice for that version of myself, a guy about to hit rock bottom in a Guamanian jail. All right, so I've picked out a few here that I want to ask you more about. Number 1, you are living a story for success written for somebody else. It's a fine story that works for a lot of people, but you will not find your life until you veer from that script and start writing your own story. Unpack that for me.
So my sister Christy, she's the MBA. I mentioned how in 2013, I walked away from litigating for the first time to called it a sabbatical. Christy was working with a major nonprofit in Washington, D.C. She's a year younger, and she followed suit in 2014, where she decided to take 6 months. And she and I actually walked across Spain on this pilgrimage route called the Camino de Santiago. And we spent 5 weeks covering 500 miles and had plenty of time to talk about the sorts of things we're digging into right here. And we ended up coming up with a term we called off scripting, and it turned into a blog. It ended up turning into a business as well, where in 2 years later, we would return to the Camino and lead 2 groups actually along the pilgrimage route. One we did 10 days, 120 miles, and then another group we did the full 500 miles over 5 weeks. And the idea with off scripting was that, I don't want to overgeneralize, but I think it's correct to say that just about all of us come away from school with a very clear idea of what success looks like, and it is this linear path. It's about climbing the ladder. It's about, checking off the boxes and collecting the degrees and getting that job and the better stuff. And like I said there, it works there are a lot of people for whom that works. And then there are people who are wired differently. And for people who are wired differently, I think we run into problems where we try to fit into that, and we struggle, as then not only do we not fit, but we feel bad that we don't fit. I felt ungrateful. I felt guilty. There's shame associated. Clearly, it indicates there's something wrong with me. I've been so lucky and so fortunate and so blessed in my life. I remember having conversation on more than one occasion with my mom, where she had a hard time understanding this idea that we felt like we didn't fit. And her asking, well, why can't you just be normal? Was essentially the message. She said it in a loving way that only a mother can, but
right.
She was genuinely asking, why can't you just be normal? And I answered me, I don't know. I don't know why, but I don't think it was, I don't think I could. And so that idea of off scripting just became this idea that if you're living a story that you feel was written for somebody else, there's upside and there's benefit to finding a way to pause your trajectory, step off of that path, create some space, create some time, and just see what happens. I'll pause there.
Well, no, I think that's super important, especially early on in your career, right? Because you're focused on, you get this job and then you start thinking in terms of, in 7, 8 to 10 years, I can be a partner and then I'll have it made, right? Then I can start really living life. It's funny, we ask all the time, pretty much anybody that interviews with us, especially attorneys, but also, paralegals and anybody really, we ask, hey, what does your career look like in 5 years? And rare is the day when anyone actually has an answer because nobody's thought about that. And I think law school does an absolutely horrific job of helping people understand all the different career paths out there as an attorney. Actually using your law degree and practicing law. I read nothing and I was told nothing about being a law firm owner. We learned zero business skills, zero marketing, zero networking skills, none of that stuff. It's all about, hey, here's the books, learn the law, and enough to be dangerous, right? And so that kind of gets into your number 4 and 5 here, which is number 4. I feel like they're kind of related. The people who tell you that law degrees are valuable because you can do so many things are right. They're also totally full of it. If you want to leverage, this is number 5, if you want to leverage your degree without practicing law, you can. An entire industry of consultants, entrepreneurs, experts, creatives, and marketers supports the legal industry. That's a rabbit hole worth exploring. I heard that a ton growing up. Hey, get a law degree, you can do so many things with it. And then you graduate from law school and you're like what? What on earth am I supposed to do? I got a law degree, but I can go get a job at a law firm. But outside of that, I have no idea what I could do with this.
Yeah, and that's why I have that tongue-in-cheek line there that I have to concede the point now. Like, look at what I'm doing thanks to my law degree today. This is awesome. I'm having a blast.
Yeah.
I don't think they conceived of this at that. Whoever was saying that, I don't think this was on the bingo card. But your point about not even learning about entrepreneurship or law firm ownership or business ownership is so on point. It's something I wasn't doing well in law school, Scott. Like, I was that guy who was still like going out 2 and 3 nights a week in law school, like getting into trouble. But what I now understand is I probably should have been starting companies from the time I was 20 years old, and exercising my creative muscles that way. And I just remember nothing of entrepreneurship or how to run a business or build a business or develop business. Just nothing in law school, and not even like it wasn't a focus. I'm not sure, other than maybe a 3rd-year elective that 15 people took once a semester. I don't even know where you would have heard it, and I don't seem to be an anomaly in that.
Yeah, and you would think it would be in the law school's best interest. My gosh, if I had a law school, right? I guess we need to bring Charlie Mann on here with his what they don't teach you in law school. Okay. But if I had a law school, I'd be marketing that thing as, here's where you come to learn how to be not just a lawyer, but also a business person, a networker, a marketer, all of those things, right? Because that is just a massive gap in education and the law.
It really is. And I don't understand why, and maybe those schools exist, or maybe there are schools that have picked up that mantle and are running with it. I am not aware of any. If anybody knows of any, I'd be very interested to hear of those, of the examples of that model. But it's just, I don't know. The cynical side of me says, like, the business model of legal education, well, say it's so good, but aren't enrollments in law schools down something like 20%? In a way that it seems maybe more and more people are making the decision that the investment is not worth it. And I have to think that this is part of the problem. Is you come out of law school and you're not actually qualified to do much of anything, which that seems like a problem.
Well, too, and for those who are on LinkedIn or on social media, you're just exposed to so many more people talking about what an awful profession it is. And I completely disagree. I think it can be an amazing profession. I absolutely love what I do. I love that I get to go to work every single day with amazing people and help people who've been injured and who are, enduring some of the worst times of their lives. I love that. There's nothing else I'd rather be doing. But the vast majority of lawyers that you see on social media, of the reports that come out, the state bars talk about how, alcoholism and drugs and depression and anxiety are massive in what we do. And I can't say they're wrong, but I really think that it doesn't have to be that way. So that could have something to do with a lower retention as well. I want to hit on another one of these too, and it's number 9, and it's a one-liner that says, "It is in your self-interest to be more selfless." Sounds like a quote right there, a Tony Albrecht quote. What do you mean by that?
I don't know if that might actually be me. So by the time I'm in that position in 2009, I think of myself as morally bankrupt and really an egomaniac, where my understanding of the world is that I'm at the center of it. Right? I'm the star of this movie, and the point is for the universe and everybody around me to give me what I want. It was not very realistic and also not very healthy, right?
Right.
And in my transition, as I started wrapping my head around what I wanted the future to be like, and really started asking more seriously, what kind of man do I want to be in my life? I found that to be almost a way of tricking my brain into behaving and going along for the ride. I was saying, like, you can still, like, that ego piece, saying, like, actually it is in your best interest. Like, the thing you want, whatever it is you think you want, the way to get it isn't by just kind of doing whatever you want, regardless of how it affects other people. The way to get more of what you want is by helping other people get more good stuff, like make more good stuff happen for other people. And I've found that to be true over the last 13 years or so. That the better I manage to, one of the mantras that I've had in my head, since 2010 is, melt my ego and let me be a part of. And so just that idea of, like, I spent too much time between my ears in my 20s, right? And just the whole world existing between my ears. And you're better off when you're trying to connect to the world around you, to people around you, to nature, and really, like, to yourself, right? To yourself beyond the thoughts that my brain is producing.
Awesome.
I think.
Well, go back, and if you're listening to this, go back and check out Tony's post. I think there are, 13 of them? Yeah, 13 of them. Mm-hmm. Very good. Tony, we are almost out of time, but I always want to know, give me 3 of your favorite books. Be fiction, nonfiction, business, you name it.
Sure. So, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield is one of my absolute favorites. It's a book about creativity that I ran across in, I want to say, 2015 for the first time. And that book has shaped my trajectory since then to a large degree. I put out my first book called In the Creative Arena last year. And In the Creative Arena is basically me doing my best impression of Stephen Pressfield and The War of Art. I'll throw out Khalil Gibran's The Prophet, which is another. Those are both, like, very short books, poetic prose from. He wrote that about 100 years ago. But just one of the most beautiful books that's ever written. And you want a third one, huh? You know what? Let's just stick with I'll throw out a book called Rediscovering Life from Anthony DeMello, who was an Indian Jesuit priest. I first ran across that book, I want to say in 2014. But actually that book is very much aligned with that whole, it's in your self-interest to be more selfless. And again, a book that really changed how I think about spirituality.
Awesome. Tony, time flies, my man. Would love to sit here for another 2 hours with you, but we're out of time. And so thank you so much for being on the Driven Crowd podcast. And for everybody tuning in, thank you for listening. And we'll see you next time on the Driven Crowd podcast.